Think about this image for a second. You're in Nara, Japan's ancient capital, watching tourists, as she describes it, kicking the sacred deer. Then you go to a shrine and see people doing pull-ups on the holy gates. This is the exact scene Sana Takaichi painted to tap into a growing nationalist frustration. She's a regular at the controversial Yasukuni Shrine, a vocal hawk on China, and a protege of the late Shinzo Abe.
Right.
She is, by almost every measure, a staunch conservative. And this week, she also became Japan's first ever female prime minister.
Quite the moment.
The woman who admires Margaret Thatcher, who opposes letting married women keep their own names, and who just told the nation, "I will give up work-life balance," is now the historic symbol of female empowerment in a country ranked 118th in the world for gender equality.
It's a fascinating, almost perfect contradiction.
It really is. And it's one that has 21-year-old women in Tokyo saying this isn't progress at all, but just the patriarchy finding a new face.
And that contradiction, I mean, that's precisely what makes this moment so, well, historically massive, yet politically so complicated. We are talking about the appointment of Japan's first female prime minister on October 21st.
Right, following her LDP leadership win just before that, October 4th.
Exactly. It's this monumental event that, should feel like a sign of major social change. But instead, it feels much more like a strategic consolidation of the deeply entrenched political right.
So that's what we need to unpack today, isn't it?
That's our mission.
Yeah.
We need to unpack this perfect contradiction, really look beyond just the symbolism.
Yeah.
We need to analyze the specific, deeply conservative social and political ideology Takaichi actually champions, then examine the strategic, almost Machiavellian reasons behind her elevation by the LDP establishment.
You mean how she actually got there?
Yes.
Yes.
Specifically how factional chess, LDP politics secured her victory. And finally, we have to look at the immense high-stakes economic and geopolitical tightropes that are policy agenda, what people are already calling Sananomics.
Sananomics, right.
That it must navigate in a world grappling with inflation and, well, great power competition.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because it's striking. We have this leader. She's just smashed the highest glass ceiling in Japan, a country really known for its lack of women in top jobs. Yet many of the people who you'd think would be celebrating, young, professional Japanese women, they're expressing skepticism, disappointment even. It's such a sharp dilemma.
It really is.
I actually came across this snippet of an online chat. It really gets to the heart of the frustration. It was these two young professional women in Tokyo talking about the appointment.
Okay.
One of them, let's call her Miki, was just expressing this deep sense of, disappointment. "We finally break the highest glass ceiling," she wrote. "And it's with someone who actively opposes things we need, like separate surnames or marriage equality."
Wow, that's pretty direct.
Yeah. And her friend pointed out, that her grandmother was just happy to see a woman in charge, calling it a victory for representation. Fair enough.
Sure, the symbolic aspect.
But Miki's reply, this is what really framed it for me. But is it a victory if she just proves that the only way a woman can lead Japan is by being more conservative and patriarchal than the men?
That framing is absolutely essential. Because it forces us, it forces you to distinguish between the symbolic breakthrough and the actual substantive social stance.
Right.
Symbolically, Takaichi is a giant leap forward, no question. She absolutely smashed the glass ceiling in Japanese politics, which is, let's face it, chronically male-dominated.
Definitely.
Just think about the context. As recently as 2023, Japan ranked lowest, dead last among all OECD nations in women's political representation. So her rise, purely as a historical marker, it's undeniably huge.
Okay, so the symbolism is there.
But here's the contradiction. Most analysts, especially those focused on social reform, they agree that while her election is certainly a step forward for women's participation in politics, it is decidedly not a victory for gender equality.
Not a triumph for feminism, as they say.
Not at all. Not a triumph of feminist forces. Takaichi has actively cultivated this image, the strong, uncompromising leader. She openly admires Margaret Thatcher.
The Iron Lady.
Exactly. She hopes to be Japan's own Iron Lady. But the policies she actually champions, they seem designed to reinforce traditional structures, not dismantle them.
And it's that Iron Lady image where the contradiction gets really sharp, doesn't it? Especially when you look at core family and gender policy issues. She seems fundamentally opposed to reforms that are actually incredibly popular.
Yes, even popular among many in the LDP's own centrist wing, and certainly among the general population.
The big one seems to be the separate surnames issue. She staunchly opposes revising that old 19th century law requiring married couples to share the same surname.
She does, and her argument is, well, that changing it could undermine family unity.
Undermine family unity.
And we really need to understand the practical context of this law to see why it generates so much heat, so much debate. The Civil Code, it dates back to the Meiji era, mandates this shared surname. Critically, this rule overwhelmingly results in women taking their husband's name. We're talking over 90% of cases.
90%. Wow.
Yeah. And critics, including major business lobbies, economic policy experts, they argue this disproportionately affects women's careers.
Yeah.
Think about it. Every time a woman marries, she might have to re-register professional qualifications. She loses years of established brand identity, faces all these administrative hurdles. It discourages career continuity.
But she insists this law has to stay to preserve the family unit.
That's her stance, despite the clear impact on women's professional lives.
Hang on a second, though. I read somewhere, didn't she personally benefit from not following that convention for her own career?
Yes. That is a profound irony and one her critics jump on constantly.
Okay, explain that.
Takaichi has actually been married twice to the same man, a former member of parliament himself.
Right.
During the first marriage, she took his name, standard practice. But in the second marriage, her husband took her name, Takaichi.
He took her name.
Yes. Reportedly because, well, she was on a more viable political path at that point. She had established her name recognition under Takaichi, so she strategically defied the convention in practice for her own political benefit.
But she insists everyone else has to follow the law that burdens women.
Precisely. She insists others must comply. This contradiction is absolutely central to why people call her things like an honorary man.
Okay, honorary man. That label starts to make more sense now. And it isn't just the surname issue, is it? Her traditionalist stance extends to the imperial family, too.
It does. When it comes to the imperial succession, she firmly supports male-only succession. She opposes any move to allow royal women, like the current emperor's daughter, Princess Aiko, to ascend the chrysanthemum throne.
Even though public opinion is overwhelmingly in favor of allowing female succession.
Yes, and that's another key point. Opinion polls consistently show huge majorities, often around 80% support, favoring female succession, and they have for generations.
And isn't there historical precedent?
There is. Historical evidence suggests the very first monarch to even use the title Tenno, which we translate as emperor, was likely a woman. But conservatives argue the current, supposedly unbroken male lineage is paramount to Japanese identity.
So ideology trumps public opinion and maybe even history there.
And this push for traditionalism is so strong, supporting male-only succession was actually baked into the policy agreement she just forged with her new coalition partner, Ishin.
So it's politically locked in now.
It shows how deeply her conservative agenda is woven into the political power structures she now leads. And just to complete the picture on her social views, she is also fundamentally opposed to same-sex marriage. That really solidifies her position on the far right of the social policy spectrum.
Okay, so opposition to separate surnames, opposition to female imperial succession, opposition to LGBTQ plus rights. When you put all that together,
Yeah.
it really explains these critical labels she gets.
Absolutely. That description by Professor Miyako Nakabayashi, that she's what you might call an idol for old men, arguing she expresses old man opinions from a woman's mouth, it just perfectly encapsulates that analysis.
Right.
The implication is pretty clear, isn't it? The only way a woman could possibly rise this high in the LDP is by adopting and reinforcing the party's long-standing patriarchal structures, basically making herself palatable to the conservative, male-dominated establishment.
Which leads back to that novelist Kyoko Nakajima calling her an honorary man.
Exactly. She's the exception that proves the rule.
And the practical result of all this conservative reinforcement,
Right.
It was visible immediately, right, in her cabinet choices
Yeah.
and her messaging about work.
Immediately visible. Upon taking office, she appointed only 2 female ministers and a 19-member cabinet.
2 out of 19, that's low.
It's strikingly low. Not only did it match her predecessor's already poor record on female representation, but it fell drastically short of her own previously announced plan. Remember, she said she wanted to ensure women's representation in top posts was not particularly lower than Nordic countries?
Nordic countries, they often have cabinets that are like 50% women, right?
Exactly. Or even higher. Takaichi's appointment of just 10.5% women.
Well, it looks like a stark ideological choice, not a reflection of circumstance.
How did she defend that when asked about the imbalance?
Her defense was, well, revealing. She argued she prioritized equal opportunity and just assigned the right people to the right positions. She also noted correctly that only about 13% of LDP politicians are women, which naturally limits her options.
Okay, so she's saying the pipeline is the problem.
Yes, but critics immediately shot back. They argued that a leader genuinely dedicated to progress would prioritize mentorship, recruitment, actively working to change that 13% statistic, not just use it as an excuse for maintaining the status quo. Right. And this brings us to that infamous quote about work ethic, the one that really cemented her alignment with that traditional, often brutal, overworking culture in Japan.
Yes. She told LDP lawmakers quite directly, "I'm going to abandon the phrase work-life balance. I would like to see you work like horses."
Work like horses. Wow.
That kind of rhetoric, I mean, it directly aligns her with the karoshi culture death by overwork that has plagued Japan for decades. It positions her own success as being rooted in embodying that traditional male-centered standard of absolute dedication, politically and corporately, which is particularly disappointing, frankly, because so many women in Japan are struggling under the double burden of career and caregiving.
Right. The pressures are immense.
And by rejecting work-life balance so explicitly, she offers zero hope for structural change for those women, the ones forced to give up careers to care for kids or aging parents.
You know, this actually brings up a really crucial point that people often make about women who break through in tough circumstances. The idea of the glass cliff.
Yes, the glass cliff. That concept is highly relevant here.
Explain that quickly.
It's the theory that women are often appointed to precarious leadership positions, the cliff, precisely when the company, or in this case the government, is already in crisis or facing incredibly high expectations with very low resources.
So they get the job when it's almost impossible to succeed.
That's the core idea. And it suggests Takaichi inherited an extremely difficult situation. She's leading a minority ruling party coalition, facing crushing domestic inflation, a polarized electorate, massive geopolitical pressures.
That's a tough hand.
It is. And the cynical question the glass cliff theory raises is, did the conservative LDP establishment promote her not despite her hardline views, but because they calculated she was the one person with the ideological steel, the backbone, to lead them through this storm? Knowing that if she fails, well, they can just revert back to the traditional male leadership structure without much political cost. It's a very cynical read, but politically it's quite astute. It's a possibility you can't ignore.
Okay, so if Takaichi isn't really a champion of gender progress, as we've sort of established, how exactly did she get the top job? It sounds like we should stop seeing her win as primarily a gender milestone.
Exactly.
And start analyzing it as a strategic political maneuver designed to consolidate the LDP's core base and shift the party further right.
Precisely. And to really understand that political calculation, we need to, move past the analysts in Tokyo and think about the LDP's core conservative base out in the regions. Imagine, say, a small traditional izakaya pub in a city like Shimonoseki, a known conservative stronghold.
Right.
There's a devout supporter of the late Shinzo Abe, maybe a local shop owner. He felt the LDP had grown complacent, maybe drifted too much towards the center since Abe left. He's worried about the economy, sure, but he's furious about China's assertiveness, feels the LDP has been too soft. Then, when Takaichi, Abe's clear protege, secures the premiership, this man raises a glass. She has steel, he reportedly told a regular. She remembers Abe-san's vision. She will not bow. For that crucial segment of the LDP electorate, her gender was completely secondary. Her ideological strength, her perceived toughness, that was everything.
So her elevation wasn't a progressive gamble at all.
Not at all. It was a cold, calculated move to recapture and consolidate that core right-wing support, prioritizing ideological clarity to shore up a party base that felt damaged and, frankly, ignored.
Let's look at the mechanics of that calculation then. She won the LDP leadership election on October 4th, but you said it wasn't a clean sweep. How did the power brokers actually engineer this?
Well, the voting breakdown really shows the complexity of LDP internal politics.
Yeah.
It operates much more like factional chess than, say, true democracy.
Right. Factions are key.
Absolutely. In the initial ballot, Takaichi did secure a massive chunk of the grassroots support. She got more than 40% of the rank-and-file members' votes, winning in 36 out of 47 prefectural chapters. So clearly popular with the base.
Okay.
However, among the incumbent MPs, the lawmakers themselves, she only placed third, behind Shinjiro Koizumi and Yoshimasa Hayashi.
So, third among the politicians. Then what happened?
Well, because no one won an outright majority, it went to a runoff vote between the top two finishers from the first round. And somewhat surprisingly, that ended up being Takaichi versus Koizumi.
Okay.
And it was in that runoff between just those two that the establishment truly swung into action. Takaichi suddenly outpolled Koizumi decisively among the lawmakers, securing the leadership.
So it wasn't a grassroots wave carrying her through. It was classic LDP factional maneuvering in the second round.
Completely, with former Prime Minister Taro Aso apparently playing four-dimensional chess in the background.
Aso, he's always a key figure, isn't he?
His role cannot be overstated here. He's widely credited as the key orchestrator behind her victory.
How did he do it? What's the theory?
Well, reports indicate Aso executed a pretty complex maneuver. He apparently asked members of his own powerful faction to strategically vote for other conservative candidates in the first ballot, people like Takayuki Kobayashi and Toshimitsu Motegi.
Why would he do that? Split the vote.
Exactly. Fragment the conservative vote initially to prevent any single moderate candidate from gaining too much momentum and potentially winning outright or getting into the top two.
Clever?
Then, in the runoff, with only Takaichi and Koizumi left, he successfully rallied the entire consolidated conservative wing behind Takaichi. It was apparently a masterpiece of political maneuvering designed to cement the right wing's power.
And does ISO benefit personally?
Well, it's widely speculated that this victory helps pave the way for the elevation of one of Iso's key factional allies, who also happens to be his brother-in-law, Shinichi Suzuki, to the highly influential post of LDP Secretary General. So yes, it consolidates his faction's power significantly.
Okay, so the alignment with Abe's blueprint, the conservative credentials, that's clearly what the LDP power structure wanted.
Yeah.
But why did they need this hard shift to the right now? What was the urgency?
Because the LDP was genuinely in palpable disarray. They'd suffered significant electoral setbacks recently, lost seats in the lower house election last year, lost more in the upper house this year.
Right, they were looking vulnerable.
Very. The party was bleeding conservative voters who felt ignored, maybe taken for granted. And those voters were starting to migrate to smaller, arch-conservative populist outfits.
Like who?
Particularly the Senseido Party. They use pretty strong nationalist, sometimes anti-immigrant rhetoric, and they really appeal to those who feel the LDP has become too soft on China, too obsessed with globalist consensus, you know? So Takaichi, with her clear conservative vision, her connection to Abe, and even that early nationalist rhetoric, remember the foreigners kicking sacred deer comment, she was seen as the chosen vehicle to bring those disaffected conservative voters back into the LDP tent to stop the bleeding on the right flank.
And complicating things further, the LDP lost its longtime coalition partner, Komeito, right? The centrist party.
Yeah.
That must have forced Takaichi into a difficult position to even form a government.
Absolutely. Komeito withdrew on October 10th. Losing them, a Buddhist-backed centrist party, was a significant political blow.
Why was Komeito so important?
They provided really reliable organizational support, especially during elections, mobilizing their base. And they also acted as a moderating influence on some of the LDP's harder-line policies, which helped ensure a stable majority government for decades.
So their withdrawal forced her hand.
It completely forced her hand. To secure the premiership on October 21st, Takaichi had to form a new and, frankly, less stable coalition, this time with the right-wing, small government-oriented Japan Innovation Party, JIP, or Ishin, as they're known.
Ishin. Okay, so what does that coalition actually look like in terms of numbers? Is it stable?
Well, that's the problem. The LDP Ishin coalition now holds 231 seats in the lower house. That's just 2 seats shy of the majority mark of 233.
2 seats short, that's tight.
Extremely tight. And in the upper house, they hold 120 seats, which is 5 shy of the 125 needed for a majority there. So Takaichi is leading a minority ruling party.
Meaning she needs help from others to pass legislation.
Exactly. She's relying on ad hoc cooperation with other small opposition conservative groups, like that Senseido party we mentioned, just for basic stability. This fragility immediately raises the stakes for every single policy debate. It gives her coalition partner Ishin a lot of leverage.
Right. So what did Ishin demand to enter this new, somewhat precarious coalition? They must have known they had leverage.
Oh, they absolutely did. And they pushed for substantial, pretty anti-establishment reforms that really challenge LDP orthodoxy. It wasn't just about getting cabinet posts for them.
Okay, like what? What were their key demands?
First, something very immediate for voters. a temporary 2-year time-limited reduction of the sales tax to 0% specifically on food items. That's aimed directly at alleviating the immediate inflationary pressures people are feeling.
0% on food for 2 years. That's significant. What else?
Second, and this one is potentially massive, stricter rules on political funding, aiming to abolish corporate donations entirely by the end of Takaichi's current LDP term in September 2027.
Abolish corporate donations. But isn't that the historic financial lifeblood of the LVP?
It absolutely is. Corporate donations have funded the LDP establishment for decades. By forcing Takaichi's government to agree, on paper at least, to abolish them, Ishin is attempting a fundamental restructuring of how the ruling party is financed. It's a huge anti-establishment demand, potentially forcing the LDP to rely much more on individual membership fees and public funding.
Wow, that's a big concession. Anything else?
Yes. They also demanded a 10% reduction in the number of Diet members, politicians, to cut the size of government. They want cuts in social insurance premiums. And they're pushing for the promotion of Osaka as a secondary capital, which actually links into this national resilience plan that Takaichi herself supports.
So Ishin really extracted a price for their support.
They did. These demands make it clear. Takaichi's government will be forced to prioritize political reform, not just her preferred economic growth agenda. It puts a key check on her power right from the start.
It seems like, on security and foreign policy, the LDP and Ishin are probably more aligned. But Takaichi's personal views, especially on historical revisionism, they remain highly sensitive internationally, right? Particularly in Asia.
They certainly do. Like Abe and many other conservatives, Takaichi does adhere to a degree of historical revisionism. She believes Japan's wartime atrocities were often exaggerated or perhaps misunderstood, and her regular visits to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine, which, as you know, honors war dead, including convicted WWII Class O war criminals, that remains a perpetual diplomatic flashpoint with China and South Korea.
Has she moderated her stance on Yasukuni since becoming leader?
Well, before her election, she was pretty unapologetic about it. She even argued once the sentence is carried out, they are no longer criminals.
Right.
However, almost immediately after securing the party presidency, she walked that back, just slightly. She now says only that she will make appropriate decisions about praying there.
Appropriate decisions. Sounds like careful diplomatic language.
It absolutely is. That shift is a crucial diplomatic maneuver. It's designed to try and manage relations with Beijing and Seoul, who view those visits as clear evidence of Japanese militarist nostalgia or lack of remorse. She has to tread carefully now she's prime minister.
Okay, so the LDP establishment maneuvered, got Takaichi into power, consolidated the right. But now she faces this crushing reality of actually governing. And as we talked about, maybe inheriting that glass cliff situation.
Yes, the pressures, domestic and global, they are immense, and they are colliding in a really challenging way. Think back to that anecdote we discussed earlier, the blog post from that young mother.
Right, the one trapped between the economy and geopolitics.
Exactly. Her post was split right down the middle. Economically, she's describing this stealth inflation at her local supermarket. The onigiri rice balls are smaller, the loaf of bread has fewer slices, but the price is the same or even higher.
Yeah, shrinkflation.
Right. And she's terrified of the winter utility bills because her husband's wages haven't budged. That's the domestic crisis Takaichi has to solve, like yesterday.
But the second half of the post.
The second half noted the increased sound of self-defense force jets flying overhead from a nearby base. She hears Takaichi talking tough on China. She needs economic relief now, desperately. But that geopolitical threat, it feels just as urgent and real to her. Takaichi is caught right in the middle of those colliding pressures.
That captures the stakes perfectly.
Okay,
let's start with the economic front then, the core of Sanonomics.
Yeah.
What's her fundamental philosophy here? How does she think she can get Japan out of this decades-long rut?
Her philosophy is pure Abenomics, really, but maybe taken to the next level. She's a firm, unwavering supporter of massive fiscal stimulus, big government spending, combined with continued low interest rates from the Bank of Japan. Her guiding star is explicit. She said it. The goal is achieving economic growth, not fiscal health. That's a direct rejection of decades of Japanese financial caution and focus on debt reduction.
Growth above all else. And what's this high-pressure economy idea?
Right, that's central to her thinking. And it's an idea championed by her key economic advisor, Etsuro Honda. It's basically a policy prescription where, for a sustained period, the government deliberately stimulates demand so that it slightly exceeds the economy's ability to supply goods and services.
Keep demand just ahead of supply. Why?
The theory is, if this condition lasts long enough, corporate behavior finally changes. Firms stop hoarding cash, they gain the incentive to actually invest in new equipment, expand production, productivity rises, and eventually, that strengthening demand pulls wages up.
Ah, demand pull inflation leading to wage growth. The holy grail for Japan.
Exactly. The ultimate goal is a sustained demand pull inflation where wage rises finally lead to greater purchasing power, breaking that 30-year-long deflationary mindset. She believes, quote, "Now is the time to hang tough and fully break free from deflationary mindsets."
Okay, that sounds aggressive long-term. But what about the immediate measures, the things to help that mother worried about her shrinking onigiri right now?
Yeah. Right. The immediate focus is on targeted, highly visible relief. First, she promised expanding these priority support grants for local governments. The idea is they can then provide subsidies tailored to specific regional circumstances, hitting those local price shocks directly.
Okay, localized help. What else?
Crucially, she's advocating for abolishing the provisional tax rates on gasoline and diesel fuel.
Cutting fuel taxes. That's a big one.
It's a significant measure. It's intended to directly lower costs for consumers and businesses right away. The estimated annual revenue loss is around $1.5 trillion, so it's costly, but it directly addresses the cost of living and transportation that hits every single household.
Makes sense. Any other immediate help?
Yes, she also promised support for small and micro businesses that are running losses, and also for the crucial agriculture, forestry, and fisheries sectors, which are all dealing with really high input costs right now, fertilizer, fuel, feed. And for hospitals and nursing homes, she's promised initial support through a supplementary budget before they even start discussing potentially raising medical and long-term care fees down the line. So, immediate cash injection first.
Okay. Now that we have the immediate relief measures clear, let's talk about her broader tax philosophy, specifically the really contentious consumption tax and also income tax. How does she approach those?
Okay, on the consumption tax, the national sales tax, which her coalition partner Ishin really pushed to cut to 0% on food, Takaichi has noticeably softened her stance on immediate broad cuts.
Why this shift?
She argues that while she won't rule it out long-term, she feels it lacks immediacy compared to the targeted price stabilization measures she's prioritizing, like the fuel tax cut. And frankly, building consensus within her own LDP party on cutting the consumption tax is proving very difficult.
Why is that? Who's blocking it?
Well, her key backer, the powerful Taro Aso, is famously critical of cutting the consumption tax during periods of inflation. His argument basically is, once you cut it, you will eventually have to raise it again. When would you possibly do that? It signals that an immediate, comprehensive consumption tax cut is pretty unlikely to pass her government.
Okay, so consumption tax cuts are maybe off the table for now.
Yeah.
But she has prioritized income tax relief, right? Especially targeting working families.
Yes, absolutely. This is actually one of the most critical structural reforms she seems to be genuinely pushing for. She strongly supports raising the income threshold, specifically the basic personal exemption, saying this is something that must be done quickly.
Why is raising that threshold so important? What's the income wall issue?
Okay, let's break this down. Because it affects millions. We're talking about the 1.03 million yen wall. Currently, if a married person, and let's be honest, it's overwhelmingly women working part-time, earns more than 1.03 million annually, which is very low, less than 7,000 USD, she loses her dependent status. And crucially, she must start paying her own social insurance premiums, which are quite high. This financial structure creates a powerful disincentive for millions of married women to work more than just minimal part-time hours.
Because any extra earnings get wiped out by taxes and insurance?
Exactly. It essentially traps them in very low earnings because the jump in income from working more hours is completely negated by these new payments. It makes no financial sense for many to work more.
So how does Takaichi plan to fix this?
Her aim is to solve this by significantly increasing that basic personal exemption threshold. The Democratic Party for the People, an opposition party that supports this, estimates that raising the combined deductions from the current 1.03 million level up to maybe 1.78 million.
That's a big jump.
It is. It would cost the government approximately 7.6 trillion in lost tax revenue annually. That's huge. But it's being framed as a necessary investment.
An investment in what?
An investment in finally breaking that social insurance trap, encouraging potentially millions of part-time working women to join the full-time workforce, boosting the overall labor supply, and ultimately boosting economic growth. It's a key part of Sananomics.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, given her strong push for massive fiscal expansion, spending big, How does that position her relative to the Bank of Japan and monetary policy? Does she just want the BOJ to keep the monetary spigots wide open, even if it risks weakening the yen further?
Her stance on the BOJ is actually quite nuanced. It reveals her attempt to balance her core Abenomics principles, low rates, easy money, with the current political reality of high inflation that people hate.
So she's not just demanding zero rates forever.
Not quite as bluntly as before, perhaps. She is fundamentally cautious about prompting the BOJ to raise interest rates too quickly. She previously warned against BOJ rate hikes, famously calling them silly, arguing they damaged Japan's fragile recovery.
Right, silly. I remember that.
While she has adjusted her public stance slightly, acknowledging the growing public dissatisfaction with inflation, she still maintains that achieving that high-pressure economy remains the core objective. Easy money is still preferred.
So how does she interact with the BOJ governor then? Does she pressure him?
Well, she has stressed the need to maintain close communication with the BOJ. This echoes the views of her advisor, Itsuro Honda, who believes the government and the BOJ must show a cooperative stance, work together, but without applying overt political pressure on rate decisions.
A delicate balance.
Very. However, even Honda has conceded recently that, depending on the macroeconomic environment, maybe raising the policy rate by a small amount, say 0.25%, would not be a problem. That's a slight shift.
Okay, so the market implications of Sananomics, this mix of proactive fiscal spending, maybe deficit financing bonds, coupled with a still somewhat dovish monetary policy, that must be pretty significant, right? What are investors anticipating?
Oh, absolutely. For the bond market and the yen, this combination definitely suggests continued pressure. The anticipation of more government spending, more bond issuance, it's expected to lead to a further weakening of the yen.
Weaker yen still.
Probably. And potentially higher long-term interest rates as investors worry more about Japan's overall fiscal health and debt levels.
What about the stock market? Usually like stimulus.
Exactly. On the equity side, the stock market is looking very bullish on this. The Nikkei 225 index is likely to push for further highs. Some analysts are even forecasting it could settle above the 50,000 mark.
50,000. Wow. What's fueling that optimism?
It's fueled purely by the expectation that Sananomics will continue to pour massive liquidity into the market. Specific sectors expected to really boom include defense contractors, cybersecurity firms, and semiconductor manufacturers.
The ones directly benefiting from her policy priorities.
Precisely. They're all direct beneficiaries of Takaichi's focus on national security, defense spending, and that big push on technology, especially chips.
And what about the Bank of Japan itself? What are they expected to actually do with interest rates?
Well, the BOJ is facing intense pressure, both domestically due to inflation and internationally, especially from the U.S. and global markets, to correct the excessively weak yen.
So they have to raise rates.
The market consensus is yes. They are widely expected to raise the main policy interest rate currently at 0.5% up to 0.75%, probably in January next year.
Just 0.25%. That seems tiny compared to global hikes.
It is tiny by global standards, but for Japan, it's historic. It would represent the first significant monetary tightening in decades. However, and this is crucial given Takaichi's known preference for easy money and her past opposition to aggressive tightening, the likely terminal rate.
Meaning the maximum peak rate they'll reach.
Exactly. The peak rate the BOJ will be allowed to reach is now considered highly probable to cap out at just 1%.
Only 1%.
Yes. It signals that while the BOJ might be allowed a small hike or two to address immediate inflation concerns and yen weakness, it probably won't be allowed to fully end the era of quantitative easing or truly normalize policy during Takaichi's current term. The government still wants that high-pressure economy.
Okay. Beyond the complex economic picture, Takaichi immediately faces some really high-stakes diplomatic challenges, too. Her conservative credentials must now be brought to bear on managing the crucial U.S. alliance and navigating the threat from China.
Absolutely. Her top diplomatic priority, without question, is ensuring the Japan-U.S. alliance remains rock solid. And interestingly, her deep conservative alignment might actually position her uniquely to understand and deal with President Trump's very transactional approach to alliances.
Which is timely because she has a summit planned with President Trump very soon, right? October 28th.
That's right. It's one of her first major international meetings.
What specifically is expected to come out of that summit? Trump is famously demanding with allies.
Exactly. Trump is widely expected to demand further increases in Japan's defense spending. He'll push for greater burden sharing, potentially including the budget for host nation support for the U.S. military presence in Japan.
More money for defense and
Yeah.
hosting U.S. troops.
Yes. He may also seek specific agreements on investment projects, maybe guaranteed amounts for U.S.-bound investments from Japanese companies, especially in manufacturing.
How will Takechi handle that?
Well, her own commitment to strengthening defense is actually an asset in these discussions. She wants to significantly increase defense spending and strengthen regional security frameworks anyway.
So she can meet some of his demands proactively.
Perhaps. And she also has a key deliverable to offer the U.S. that goes beyond just traditional military hardware. It's this bilateral chip technology partnership.
Ah, the semiconductor push. Tell me more about that.
This is being framed as Japan's vital national project. The goal is to bolster domestic manufacturing for cutting-edge 2-nanometer chips. These are seen as absolutely critical for national security and achieving strategic independence, especially amid the ongoing U.S.-China technological conflict.
So Japan is investing heavily in this.
Massively. Japan is investing around $3.9 trillion, that's billions of dollars, in these advanced chip projects just between 2022 and 2025. This includes significant financial support for U.S. firms like Micron Technology to build facilities in Japan.
So she can frame defense cooperation not just through military spending, but through vital tech supply chain resilience.
Precisely. It aligns perfectly with U.S. concerns about China and technology competition.
Okay, turning to China itself. Takechi is known as a hawk. How does she plan to navigate that crucial and obviously very tense relationship?
She is definitely a vocal critic of China's military expansion and regional assertiveness. Now that she's PM, she has to navigate these relations much more carefully, though. Meaning she needs to avoid the kind of deliberately provocative statements she's sometimes made in the past, like advocating for a quasi-security alliance with Taiwan. That's too risky now.
So what's her core strategy towards China likely to be?
It seems her core strategy will be focused on building resilience against potential economic coercion from Beijing, preparing Japan for possible trade wars, supply chain disruptions, things China might use as political leverage.
Building economic defenses, basically.
Yes. And diplomatically, her position on Taiwan is very carefully worded. She says Japan supports a one-China policy as defined by Japan.
As defined by Japan, what does that nuance mean?
That specific phrasing is important. It means Japan adheres to its own long-standing interpretation of the diplomatic arrangement. This interpretation allows for robust, non-official relations with Taiwan trade, cultural ties, etc., while carefully avoiding any explicit endorsement of Beijing's maximalist claims over the island's sovereignty.
So maintain ambiguity while building strength.
Essentially. She understands that reshaping the region to be less dependent on and less centered around China represents a better, more sustainable long-term strategy than seeking direct military confrontation right now.
And finally, looking beyond the big two, U.S. and China, how is she planning to expand Japan's footprint in Asia and globally?
Well, she seems committed to continuing the recent hard-won rapprochement between Japan and South Korea. That relationship is crucial.
Right, improving ties with Seoul.
Yes, and strengthening the trilateral security frameworks U.S., Japan, South Korea, especially for things like coordinating missile defense and managing North Korea. She also strongly advocates for India's inclusion into the APEC Economic Forum.
Bringing India into APEC, why?
To serve as a crucial strategic counterweight to China's influence within the broader Indo-Pacific region. It reinforces her larger goal of promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific.
So a more active, assertive diplomatic posture overall.
Definitely. Takaichi has explicitly stated she intends to travel overseas regularly to spread the word that Japan is back. It signals an aggressive push for diplomatic re-engagement and really asserting Japan's significant presence on the global stage after maybe a few years of slightly lower profile.
So putting it all together, Takaichi's rise is really this compelling, incredibly complex case study, isn't it?
It truly is, where the potent symbol of gender progress, Japan's first female PM, has been strategically leveraged, you could argue co-opted, to enact a deep ideological rightward shift in Japanese politics.
Her victory seems less about shattering social barriers.
And much more about consolidating the LDP's conservative base. It was a victory engineered, let's be clear, by powerful men like Taro Aso, designed to secure a policy agenda aligned with the late Shinzo Abe's vision for a strong, assertive, economically revived Japan.
And her longevity in power now hinges entirely on this really difficult balancing act.
Entirely. Domestically, she must successfully implement Sananomics. That means breaking the deflationary mindset, addressing the crushing inflation people feel now through that targeted spending, and crucially, structural labor reform, like lifting that income wall for part-time workers.
Without completely bankrupting the nation in the process.
Right. And geopolitically, she has to leverage her conservative credentials to manage that demanding transactional U.S. partnership under Trump while simultaneously building economic and technological resilience to contain China's growing influence.
It sounds like her success depends less on ideological purity now.
Or being the honorary man.
And more on just pragmatic leadership. And maybe navigating those internal LDP politics that got her there in the first place.
Exactly. Can she transcend the factional deals that secured her the premiership to actually govern effectively? That's the billion-yen question.
So what does this all mean at the end of the day? We have Japan, ranked 118th in the world for gender equality, now led by a woman who actively opposes the most popular social reforms like separate surnames. Yet she's simultaneously pushing incredibly aggressive fiscal policy and a significantly enhanced defense posture. The true measure of her tenure, it seems, won't simply be that she broke the highest glass ceiling.
No, the symbolism only gets you so far.
It'll be whether her actual policy choices, the economic revitalization efforts, the enhanced defense spending, and maybe even the political reforms forced upon her by her coalition partners like Yishin, whether those can ultimately overcome the current crises and tangibly improve the lives of the ordinary Japanese people she serves. That's the real test.